pleasant morning to you out there. The program is the Dailies on Network Television International, where we will be taking you down through the papers, what is trending on our Nigerian newspaper and how it affects you. And if you will notice that the weather has been cloudy as of yesterday down till today, so please, this is just an advice to try and keep yourself warm if you're around just or the environment. If you can get a face mask, please do that as well, just so you can avoid any airborne disease whatsoever. I am Sele Lashadasham, and I'll be doing this alongside Rachel Tansey. Good morning,
Morning,
Rachel.
Sele.
How you doing?
I'm fine. How about you?
I'm great. How about the change of weather from yesterday?
Well, it's fine so far. Just as you said, just people should take precaution. Try to do whatever that will boost your immune system. Take vitamins, because this change of weather comes with a lot of sicknesses, like looking at the weather. So just do whatever it takes to be healthy in this period.
Of course.
Yes.
We're live on Facebook and on YouTube. You can do well to follow us live there by dropping your comment or your contribution on any of the story that is of interest to you. And we will go straight into the paper, starting with the Nation newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, Senate bars new members from top posts. Diphtheria, FCT, 18 states may bring back face mask use. UK, US to partner federal government on marine and blue economy. We have Balarabe, Bio Ibrahim, Olawale for ministerial screening. The big story on the paper, agreement with organized labor to cost federal government 2 trillion naira. Tinubu's certificate in order, CSU disposes in court. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 4. And that's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at this day newspaper, starting with a big story on this day where we are having labor to federal government. There will be no warning before next strike if you unite on agreement. With the rider insists there is trust gap between Nigerian leaders and the masses. Says crisis not over yet. Some pensioners in 5,000. Some pensioners are earning 5,000 naira. This is a sad one. Explain reason for suspending industrial strike. You can do well to start reading some of those reasons and the agreement on the front page and continue inside the paper. Also, we are having other stories here. Tinubu replaces El-Rufai, appoints Balarabe, 2 others as ministerial nominees, with detail found on page 6. Also, we have coming from the federal government 8,406 confirmed cases of diphtheria in 19 states. Do well to read more of that on page 8 and how you can protect yourself and your loved ones. Also, we are having British International Investment Partners Access Bank on $60 million trade finance on lending facility for 5 African countries. Detail of that story can be found inside the paper. We have a picture story where we can say additional becomes Grand Commandant Order of Gambia. You can do well to grab the paper and see how Nigerians are representing us well in diaspora, and that's all on this day newspaper.
On Leadership newspaper, states consider face masks as cases escalate. You can find more details of the diphtheria case on page 4. Balarabe replaces El-Rufai as ministerial nominee. We have trending. Fashola warns against inscribing coat of arms on national flag. 12.5 kg of cooking gas sells for 12,500 naira. You can find both details of these stories on page 2. Afrexim Bank shops for $3 billion to fulfill agreement with NNPCL. You can start with the details on the front page and continue inside the paper. Lawyers commend CSU over prompt release of Tinubu's academic records. The big story on the paper, impeachment plot, Senate amends rule to ward off threats against Akpabio, stops Yari, other first-timers from eyeing Senate presidency. Concerns mount over non-inauguration of 74 standing committees. You can find details on page 4. IHS Towers meet Tinubu list companies giant strides. Naira Marley in police custody over Mohbad's death. 21 missing, 11 rescued from KB canoe mishap. You can find more details on page 9, and that's all the news on Leadership newspaper.
On the Blueprint newspaper, we are having Army others probe into alleged poor feeding of troops. You can find more detail of that on page 5. And on the VAT removal will push down diesel prices is coming from Malagage. You can find more detail of what that means on page 19. Coming from Lagos State, 2 confirmed dead in last mile official and drivers shuffle. You can find more detail of this story on page 5. We've seen this story over and over, especially coming from residents of Lagos. Some of their talking about what they go through in the hands of last mile officials. So you can do well to find more detail of that story in the paper. Also, we're having VONDG tackles Atiku over Tinubu's Chicago varsity certificate role. The big story coming from the Chief Justice of Nigeria to Justice and judges. Don't allow technicality stand in the way of justice, with the rider charges judicial officers to resolve lingering crisis in the court. Tinubu asks NJI on perception of judiciary, laws EFCC on anti-craft war. Says my administration determined to bring corruption to its knees. You can read more of that story on page 6. 62 million Nigerians to benefit from cash transfer, 1.5 million from Yaloja Fund. This is coming from Betty Edu, talking about poverty elevation key to development. You can see her in the picture story over there, and we hope that this money gets to reach everybody. The manner of how it will be transferred and how the people who are involved in the social register, it's a point that you would love to know about, so you can do well to read more of that story inside the paper. It's cheaper constructing concrete roads, coming from Umahi. He is insisting on that story. You can find more on page 23. Ex-NSPMCMD Buffers dies. That's a sad one. You can find that inside the paper. Pastor dies, 3 others injured in Benue building collapse. More detail can be found on page 15. And that's all on the Blueprint newspaper.
On Vanguard newspaper, price of cooking gas up 70%, operators expect further rise. New Senate rule restricts president's deputy seat to ranking members. You can find more details on page 25. And on tribunal judgment, DSS arrests lady threatening suicide bomb attack on VP Ganduje, lead judge, and Gauna. You can find more details on page 12. The big story on the paper, frontline troops, army probes claims of poor feeding. Army takes allegation very seriously, says spokesman, at priority placed on troops' welfare, supply chain under through thorough investigation. And we have COAS committed to ensuring troops are well fed, motivated, and equipped. 30 down in fresh KP boat accident. You can find more details on page 12. Why we killed retired Benue juries, a statement coming from gang members. You can find more details on page 6. 8 abducted NYSC members still in captivity. This is a statement coming from their family. You can find more details on page 6. Church building collapses in Benue, kills pastor and injures 4 others. And on SGBV, federal government OK's review of legal frameworks meet critical stakeholders. You can find more details on page 3. And we have an affair Babalola column on page 22. Real Madrid monitoring Victor Boniface. This is for sports lover. You can find details on page 28. And that's all the news on Vanguard newspaper.
On the Punch newspaper, 100 billion naira CNG buses, Senate rejects CBN loan, warned Tinubu against illegal spending. More detail of that story can be found on page 26. 17 independent discos get license, 10 operational. 23 oil blocks fail to produce crude oil, coming from the federal government. You can find detail of that story on page 9. The big story on Tinubu's credentials, APC lampos Atiku, ex-VP set to submit documents in Supreme Court with the rider. Atiku's journey to Chicago varsity a fruitless exercise, ex-VP a loser, says the APC. President document released by varsity have vindicated us. This is coming from PDP insists. President's document released by varsity have vindicated us. PDP insists. You can find more of that story inside the paper. Coming from the minister, Tinubu picks Bararabe to replace Erufai. You can find that on page 8. And also we are having Ondo Assembly asks CG to raise impeachment panel. You can find more of that story on page 8. Two kill as LASMA officials and driver clash. LG officer race. You can find that on page 4 and 5. 22 drowned as boat capsized in Niger. 6 bodies recovered. 22 drowned as boat capsized in Niger. 6 bodies recovered. You can find more detail on page 16. We have a picture story where we can see the president with two important prominents. You can do well to grab the punch and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Nigerian Tribune, reps to probe 15.5 trillion naira pension asset, status of 10 trillion naira loan to federal government. 23 fare dead in Kebbi boat accident. More details can be found on page 29. We have cleared all passport backlog. A statement coming from NIS says era of passport backlog over. Naira Marley now in our custody. A statement coming from the police. The big story on the paper: Senate amends rules. First timers can't contest for Senate president or deputy. You can find more details on page 4. Tinubu 6 Senate confirmation of 3 new ministerial nominees. Pregnant woman, 2 children die as Latsma policeman struggle with driver in Lagos State. Pastor dies as church building collapses in Benue. More details can be found on page 29. And on impeachment, Ondo Assembly directs CG to constitute 7-man panel on deputy governor. Petitions NJC over federal court judge ruling. And on Tinubu's document, Chicago State University testifies in deposition proceedings. You can find more details on page 30, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
Richard, I think this story has made it round the paper, the issue of LASMA in Lagos State. And then we're seeing here, according to the paper, a pregnant woman and 2 children. That's a result of the clash. And if you've had conversation with residents of Lagos State and people, you will realize that there are times, sometimes, in as much as this body is trying to carry out their own responsibilities. But I feel there's a better way you can actually address civilians when you find them either maybe they're breaking a particular traffic law or running, whatever it is that you feel it is. I think there's a proper way. Over the years, we've heard of people getting into one problem or the other with this. Is it with the federal road safety? Is it the VIU? Sometimes you see them standing on the road and they tell if you do not stop. And then sometimes even at the detriment of their own, life, because somebody can actually not be in his or her right senses and just hit this officials and do something. And now we're seeing that a pregnant woman and 2 children die as a result of that. And when you check detail, you find that yes, even if it is the fault of the driver, I believe that there are better ways. And that's why we keep talking about training of our particular, agency that actually monitor law enforcement in the state. Because even not just in our state, in the nation entirely, I think it is important. Yesterday, we were looking at the issue of extortion from the police. And today, we're seeing this story. So I'm just hoping that the official will actually call them to order, talking about LASMA, because I've had a lot of story about LASMA's officials, what they do, extortion even coming from them and all of that. So I don't know, but I just hope that this case will not just go unnoticed. It will be probed and then to find out what was the cause of it and how they can be called to order before things get out of hand eventually.
So anytime you see such clash, either be it LASMA police, be it police with any other law enforcement agency, it's just always an issue of jurisdiction. Because I believe that if they should know their jurisdiction, where their power starts and where it ends, and where it's not their business and when it's their business, I believe that this kind of clash will not be seen in the first place. And then you wonder, when you were trained, weren't you told where you were supposed to operate, how you are supposed to operate, what is your cup of tea and what is not your cup of tea, and things like that. Then you find out that there's a lot of fault. It's not just in the officers that are involved in this situation, but it's also involved from where they are getting their order, where they're getting their job description, where they're getting what they're supposed to do, their tasks, and all of that is all a factor in this problem, in this clash. And whether we like it or not, where there is an issue of power, who should be right and who shouldn't be, there are always casualties. And it's usually not the people who are fighting themselves, but the civilians that just happen to be unfortunate in the middle of all that turmoil and all of that. So I just really hope that the Lagos state government will come and say, okay, what is LASTMA's jurisdiction? What is it that they can do and can't do, so that we'll stop seeing such clashes that will lead to the end of anybody's life, any civilian's life. Because what is that scuffle that has to do with the driver, that has to do with the policeman, that has to do with LASTMA, and now we are seeing it resulting to the death of people? It means someone is going overboard in doing what they're supposed to do, because in the first place, whatever clash shouldn't lead to the death of anybody. So it means there is some extreme action that was taken that shouldn't even be in the first place. So I just hope that the necessary authority will look into it and just make sure that such things don't keep happening.
Of course, when you were talking, I remember the one we had at the early this year or last year, where a policeman shot a lawyer, and then that was how she lost her life. Now this is all as a result of all of this. So just like you've rightly stated, I hope that they realize that there are certain things they can do and certain things they cannot do, and they need to be called to order. Let's take a look at the next paper, which is the Guardian newspaper, starting with this big one talking about hurdles for the federal government on 2024 budget, over 10 trillion naira deficit and palliative. And if you take a closer look here, you see the 2022 federal government budget implementation report, where we have the expenditure, we have the total federal government revenue, and then we have the revenue that comes into the country. And then with about 35,000 naira add on to salaries, can the federal government afford a new minimum wage? Now, this is a question because according to the fiscal deficit here, we have about 9.30 trillion naira. Meanwhile, the total revenue the government is realizing is 5.30. So we're having a deficit of about 5 points, so 5 trillion naira. So we begin to wonder, how would the government come about this new minimum wage? And if they are hoping to implement this minimum wage starting from October, then there is a need for the federal government to look inwardly and see what they can do. And I think, Rachel, this is really, an assignment for the government, because when I'm taking a closer look at this, and then presently our revenue is just 5.
It's just 5.
And then we are having a deficit of 9.30.
Yes.
So you begin to tell, where do we hope to realize this remaining money to actually add up to what we're having? And let's not forget, we spend about 96 of our revenue trying to pay off our debt. And then how much is our debt presently? It keeps going high and high. Recently, we saw in the paper, we're trying to apply for another new loan again because of things on ground. And then just recently, the federal government said 35,000 naira added to the 30,000 naira. So we're talking about minimum wage of about 65,000 that's supposed to be implemented from this month. So you begin to ask, where is the government hoping to make the money? And I remember you and I have always been emphatic about the fact that let's not just put our whole eggs in one basket, talking about just focusing on oil. We've realized that we have a lot of things in this country that we can actually generate funds from, but it seems we're just sitting on our mineral resources. We've been talking about the solid mineral, we've been talking about agriculture, we've even been talking about entertainment that the government is not paying attention to. It will shock you to realize how much is being discovered from entertainment. Let's just talk about music. Don't even go down to the Nollywood. How much is being discovered? We've seen over the years, some of the movies that make it to Netflix and all of that, and then a lot of money is being discovered. So why don't we sit and say, okay, if this sector is actually, fetching us some money, what can we do to actually key into that, rather than just focusing and then over and over we are having Navy bumping one illegal refinery after another. So you begin to ask, are we actually gaining or are we losing as a country? Where are we going? Are we going forward or backward as a country? Now, this is not to say that to backlash any leader, but this is for us as a country, and I use us deliberately because it's a collective effort. It's not all about saying let's leave it to the health sector, let's leave it to what can everybody do to make sure we do this, because believe you me, Rachel, directly or indirectly we'll all be affected. We saw when about 25% will be added to education. Now with this deficit, where is the money going to come from to be key into that place? Yes, we see international bodies, World Bank, giving money to the country, but then is this money really going to the place that it's supposed to go? Here we are seeing even the CNG buses is a concern. We don't know when they'll start ruling. So looking at this budget, you begin to tell that, wow, the government have a lot. I don't know how they hope to achieve that, but then our fingers are crossed, and then we hope to see how they will achieve all of this eventually.
Like Stella, when you look at this budget, it looks like magic in a lot of ways, because If we are earning 5.30 trillion naira as revenue for last year, and then we are having 91%, let's leave it at 90% of our revenue going to debt servicing, then it means we have barely 300 billion naira left for us to spend. And then we're seeing that our total expenditure is over 14.60 trillion naira. So now if you can minus there about, let's be fair and say 500 billion naira from our expenditure, it means that 14 trillion naira, let's leave it at the 630 billion naira, is what we have that we've spent out of this 14.63 trillion naira. It means that we are spending 14 trillion naira that is not even our money. It means it's borrowed fund, obviously. So even this fiscal deficit of 9.30 is not even that. It is what it is as it is, but then it means that our expenditure is going on debt servicing as we have it. And then you see an expenditure of 810.12 billion naira here at the top and all of that. And then you see, no wonder that even if we have the president saying that we are not going to borrow, we have no option than to borrow because we are not generating enough for our expenditure, and we already have a backlog of debt that we just have to keep servicing and servicing. And then I believe that by the time 2022 reports will be out, it will be times 3 of this with the way things are going, because I mean we are having a free fall, we are having our currency losing more value, we are still servicing debts. We keep seeing such reports coming from the debt management office. We are seeing that our debt profile is increasing and all of that. So I mean it's wow on a lot of levels. So just seeing how we are going about both our monetary and fiscal policies in this country is in no way moving towards making sure this red is not this much on this infograph. So I'm just waiting to see what the Nigerian government will do differently that will for some reason bring balance, because this doesn't look balanced. It's nothing close to balance, and then we are still not doing the things that will make it balanced as it is now. We are not doing anything to make it balanced. But then I just hope that with this, I keep saying the government have all the resources. They know exactly that this is what it is. It's just for them to do the job, to take the right decisions, to implement it the right way, and then to make the necessary sacrifices. I mean, when it comes to our expenditure, what are we spending our money on? It all says whether we are driving towards a balanced system, whether we will not wake up to having such deficit in the nearest future. But I just hope that we have an administration that is capable of fixing all of this.
You know, I'm just thinking about the 2 trillion naira that government is going to use to actually meet up what NLC are asking them.
Yes.
So I'm removing that 2 trillion from here, Rachel, and
it's not even going to be from here.
So right now, just like you said, it seems like it's a magic, or I don't know, but let's not say that it's a lot of bad stories or sad stories, but then just like you said, we believe the government can come up with something eventually. Let's look at other stories still on the Guardian newspaper, where we have Tinubu nominates Bararabe to replace Erufai and 2 others. Lawmakers bar first-time members from Senate presidency. You can find that on page 3. Greener pasture tackling mass exodus on desert. Merited routes. You can find that analysis on page 4. 2 children critically injured. Pregnant woman tricycle die in Lagos auto crash. You can find more inside the paper. Shaibu Kabiru G descent Tinubu's Chicago document. You can find that on page 3. And I think that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On New Telegraph newspaper, Nigerians lose 752.25 billion naira in fuel shipment to foreigners. Victims blame customs, NNPCL banks. And on output, Nigeria's oil quota may remain as OPEC Plus panel meets today. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 7. Federal government offers 150 billion naira sukuk bond at 1,000 naira per unit. You can find more details on page 7 for those who are planning to invest on bonds. Reps to probe fail 6.4 billion naira shoreline protection contract in Ondo. Tinubu replaces Erufai with Balarabe as ministerial nominee. Although Deputy Governor shunned assembly, failed to respond to allegations, a statement coming from the speaker. The big story on New Telegraph, silent moratorium causing prison congestion, is a statement coming from a source. As 3,325 condemned inmates await hangman's news, governors foot dragging on signing death warrants, non-execution taking toll on our facilities. A statement coming from NCOS. You can find more details on page 3. In a lot of places, the death sentence is no longer it. I mean, in a lot of countries have moved past death sentencing, and then we're seeing 3,325 condemned inmates await hangman news. But I believe that the major reason, if I would say, is causing congestion in our prison is that a lot of people are in this prison and some haven't been able to have a parole hearing, for example, because we don't even have the system to manage that, because it is expected that after a period of time, even on good character, some prisoners should be pardoned. Yes, for a while you put them on parole for a period of time to see if they go back, and then you get them back in. Also, we have prisoners that are yet to even have their hearings and all of that, and we have prisoners that are sure overdue, that by now they should have been out, but maybe records and all of that is not in place. And then we are seeing governors foot dragging on signing death warrants. Why are we having all of these things? I mean, it shows that someone somewhere is sleeping on their job. We keep saying that somebody is not doing their job, because this shouldn't even be problems in the first place. This should be if we are seeing issues of welfare in the prison, probably understood every sector of the economy in Nigeria, everybody is hearing
sorry, Rachel,
it. But
because you remember there was a time on the paper when we saw the federal government say that henceforth states will be taking care of their inmates.
Yes,
so maybe this is like what is actually leading to this.
But then I see these problems as just someone sleeping and not just doing their work, because these are papers, these are documents that should be cleared as they come and they go and all of that. But then we are seeing that nothing is being done about it. So it's really heartbreaking to see such things making it on the paper, and problems that shouldn't even exist in the problem are existing. I just hope that the necessary authority do the needful. You can find more details on page 3. Still on New Telegraph, APC's victory is not enough. Ganduje tells Buhari expects win in Kogi, Imo, Bayelsa, Guba polls. Red Chamber bars first-timers from contesting Senate presidency, and Deputy approves 9 more standing committees. You can find more details on page 2. OAU students protest tuition fee hike, shut down varsity. And on hardship, senators urge Tinubu to present 2023 supplementary budget for CNG buses, warn it's illegal to spend taxpayer monies without National Assembly approval. You can find more details on page 4. ACF bewails decline in income value living standard of Nigerians, blames fuel subsidy removal and monetary policies, says economic challenges felt more in the north, urges federal government to ignore some World Bank IMF policies, comments federal government labor truce over strike. You can find more details on page 2. And at the downside of the paper, we have millions unaware of second-hand smoke exposure, a statement coming from experts, and you can find details on page 6. And that's all the news on New Telegraph newspaper.
All right, before we move further to other paper analysis, we'll do well to take a break at this moment, let you chew the stories, drop your comment on our Facebook, and when we come back, we'll open the phone line so we can hear what your own contribution is concerning any of the story that is of interest to you. Please stay tuned with us.
Make your everyday informative, make your everyday count. Know your world, daily affairs, national and international, with authentic news events as they unfold on Global News and Zoom on Nigeria, Monday to Friday at 1 p.m.
Thanks for staying tuned. It's still the dailies. We've been looking at various stories on the paper, looking at what Labour and government are saying, also looking at our debt deficit, looking at the budget for 2024, how the government will come up with the funds to actually, fund all of these things that actually are waiting there with the palliative just by the corner. So quite a lot for the government to actually shoulder. So we'd love to hear what your own contribution is concerning any of the story. You can do well to call us on our number that is on your screen. Do well to turn down the volume of your TV set, please, and be civil, and also try to summarize your point in a minute so other callers can also have the room to air their view. I still have Rachel Tanzania with me. Thank you so much, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sarah.
All right, let's take a look at the next paper before the phones start coming in. We'll be looking at Nigerian News Direct. NCDMB highlights critical requirements for low-cost manufacturing as Abia opens industrial park. Immigration clears passport backlog of 204,332. More can be found on page 4. We will remember they gave them a timeline to clear that, and they have done just that. One-way driver crushes pregnant woman to death, injures 2. This is a sad one. You can find more on page 2. The big story for Nigerian News Direct: Chicago Varsity controversy trails release of Tinubu's academic credentials, with the writer saying Tinubu is spending dollars to suppress certificate release. This is coming from the chief tier of Labour Party. He should have saved Nigerians this embarrassment. You can do well to find more detail of all what other people have to say about that on page 4. Reps to probe Pencom assets recover 10 trillion naira federal government loan. More can be found on page 3. Oyo is open to partnerships on agribusiness, mineral development, and others, coming from Makinde. Ondo Assembly petition NJC to investigate embattled deputy governor. And outside of the paper, Tinubu forwards 3 new ministerial nominees to Senate. You can find that inside the paper. And the picture story here, we can see Governor Abiodun. You can do well to grab the paper and see more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On the Daily Times newspaper, we have the Debt Management Office offers 150 billion naira sukuk bond for subscription at 1,000 naira per unit. The big story on the paper: scandal rocks presidential villa over Tinubu's U.S. educational records. Huriwa and Perogi react, moms the word from presidency. You can start with the details on the front page and continue inside the paper. Lalong raises committee to resolve complaints over NSITF. Reps Deputy Speaker lose federal government labor for averting strike. Oyo APC glum over lack of reward by Abuja. You can find more details on page 11. Amid impeachment rumbling, Akpabio tightens hold on power. First time senator knocked out of race for Senate presidency. You can start with the details on the front page and continue inside the paper. And then we have Tinubu replaces Nasir El-Rufai, 6 confirmation for additional ministerial nominees. You can find more details on page 2. And then we have a picture showing students of Abafemi Awolowo University saying a protest. And then we have a student here saying, my mama dey sell fufu, my papa dey ride Okada, where you want make I get 90k. Now this is a student lamenting that I am from a poor background, where do you want me to get 90,000 naira? And that's all the news on the Daily Times newspaper.
And this is just one out of many other students that actually came out for that protest. Of course, I feel the government should feel the pain of the student. And I don't know what the governor of Oyo State is hoping to do about this. But this is a federal university, so I'm hoping that this is in the hands of the federal government. It's beyond the state government. True. So we hope something will be done. I feel it for the student. Imagine giving as far as even going to tell you the occupation of his parents, and then this is just 90k. We have other universities that are paying more than that, 100k. For somebody that is maybe a medical student, will be paying over 100 and something, getting to 200. So I really feel the pain of Nigerians. So we hope that the government will come to their aid. Let's take a look at the Metrics newspaper. Nigerian Immigration Service clears passport backlogs. You can find more on the front page and inside the paper. Oyedele urges Nigerians to pray for sale of refineries. You can find more on page 15. Reaction traced Tinubu academic records, where we are having CSU registrar counter speculation, say disparity due to clerical error. Tinubu, who attended Chicago University, same as Nigeria's president, coming from the CSU registrar. Tinubu graduated from Chicago University. This is also other expert backing up to say that the president actually attended university. But of course, Nigerians have the right to say, then why were you holding the result in the first place?
Yeah.
This is a back and forth that it was not just during the presidential election. Far back from when he was the governor of Lagos State, a lot of people have been asking the president, just bring out your result. We want to know who are your classmates, when, which year, and all of that, And it seems as if we're being ruled by a leader that did not have any qualification. Little did we know he actually had one, and Nigerians felt this is something you should have given for a very long period of time. Why the back and forth and all of that? But well, finally,
It still feels like foul play, Sele.
Well,
It still feels like, Sele, if I should ask you for your certificate, I think you're just going to stretch your hands, pick it, and show it to me. I believe so. Same for me. If I'm to be asked for my certificate today for whatsoever reason, I'm just a stretch away from picking it and showing it to whosoever. But that delay still feels like foul play on another level. Why did it have to take that long? If I have my graduate certificate, I should have it any day, anytime, soft copy, hard copy, any type of copy you want. But then it's out there, and then we are grateful that perhaps the back and forth will be over, and then Nigerians can move past this. Atiku can move past this, and any other person that was anticipating for the certificate can move past it.
Of course, well, finally. Other stories seen on the Matrix newspaper, we are having the raising global demand will push oil price up. OPEC Secretary General is saying, so you can keep your fingers tight and see what this would lead. You can find more detail of that story on page 15. We have Pastor Paul NHF visit scene of a collapsed Dunamis church building. More detail can be found on page 3. Tinubu seeks Senate confirmation of 3 additional ministers. You can find that inside the paper. NLC to negotiate up to 200,000 as new minimum wage. This is coming from Ajero. Well, we hope the government will be able to actually give you your heart desire of the 200,000 after increasing the 35,000. Well, that's a question that is in the minds of Nigeria, how you hope to actually get that. Also, we're having the issue of Mohbad's death, where we have Naira Marley is in police custody over Mohbad's death. You can find more of that story inside the paper, and that's all on the Matrix newspaper.
On Daily Independent, our negotiation with FG at preliminary stage, a statement coming from NLC. Federal government asks diphtheria impact states to make face masks compulsory, declares Kano as epicenter of the disease. So I believe people in Kano State, we see even the FCT should please start wearing their face masks. You can find more details on page 3. Reps to probe 15.5 trillion naira pension assets, 10 trillion naira advance to federal government. Urge government to stop killing of peasant farmers across Nigeria. Asks IGP to secure release of abducted corps members in Zamfara State. DMO offers 150 billion naira sukuk bond for subscription at 1,000 naira per unit. Again, Ondo Assembly asks CJ to raise impeachment panel against Deputy Governor. Petitions NGC over Federal High Court and restraining order. More details can be found on page 7. First-time senators barred from vying for Senate President and Deputy positions. Tinubu replaces El-Rufai Lawal as Kaduna ministerial nominee. Comments EFCC unfolds more robust agenda. You can find more details on page 6. Still on Daily Independent, Tinubu CSU released record shows owned by female. We are having another controversial statement coming. Speak up on Tinubu certificate scandal showing car told. You can find more details on page 29. And we have a picture story saying U.S. House Speaker removes. Okay, it's not the picture story, but we have another story saying U.S. House Speaker removed from office for first time in history. You can find more details on page 29, and I believe that's McCarthy. And at the downside of the story, we have Naira Marley now in police custody. More details can be found on page 6, and that's all the news on Daily Independent.
On the first news from newspaper, we have Senate bars first timers from Senate presidency and deputy contest. CASU confirmed Tinubu, now president of Nigeria, graduated from school. Reps move to recover 10 trillion naira pension fund borrowed by the federal government. Be patient with Tinubu, on he pleads with Nigerians. You can find more inside the paper. And on suspended strike, our negotiation with the federal government at the preliminary stage coming from the NLC says we will ask for a realistic minimum wage, urges the federal government to keep its part of the bargain. And also we have the victory dance jubilant civil servant welcoming Governor Dabo Abiodun back to his Moshe Abeokuta governor's office in celebration of his recent victory at the Ogun State Governorship Election Petition Tribunal on Tuesday. More detail can be found in the paper. Also, we are having IPAC hails Ogun Tribunal verdict, congratulates Governor Abiodun. Impeachment, set up panel on the Deputy Governor Ondo Assembly direct CG. You can find more in the paper. DSS arrests woman who threatened suicide bombing over Kanu Guba judgment. You can find more in that. That is there how far some people can go. But then I always say, do not get involved in this politicians' fight. Just let it be, pray and hope for the best. And that's all on the First News newspaper.
On the Nigerian Standard, opioid addiction market fuels Nigeria's drug crisis. Mutfang urges on professionalism. NAV airstrike destroy terrorist hideout. Maintain faith in the greatness of our nation. A statement coming from RSA. You can find more details on page 10. The big story on the paper, federal government signs 15-point memorandum with organized labor. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 5. Nigeria records over 1,000 Lassa fever cases in 9 months. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 2. Mutfang affirms commitment to social contract. More details can be found on page 1. And then we have a picture story. Plateau State Governor Barrister Caleb Manasseh Mutfang on a motorcade reviewing the parade mounted by Nigeria Police Force with other paramilitary organization at Nigeria's 63rd Independence Celebration at the Rangpan Township Stadium on Monday. And that's all the news on the Nigerian Standard newspaper.
And on Dailies newspaper, UNDP develops master plan to end flooding in Anambra State. You can find that on page 8. And on ministers, Kwara Ondo get more slot as Tinubu raises the number to 48. President nominates 3 additional ministers and then names Abba Balarabe as El-Rufai's replacement. More can be found on page 6. Lagos resident slam traffic officer over death of pregnant woman, 2 children and others. 23 killed in Kebbi, boat mishap. Pastor dies in collapsed church building in Benue, 4 others injured. Senate bars newcomers from holding leadership position with detail found on page 6. Only 40 million Nigerians pay taxes, says the RMAFC, and I do not know how do you intend to make everybody to pay. We remember the paper last week where we saw that rich or wealthy Nigerians will be taxed more tax. So we hope to see how the RMAF hope to get more tax out of Nigerians to make sure that everybody is a taxpayer. Other stories on the paper, we have OAU student reject tuition fee review insists on 50% reduction. More can be found on page 28. And on the impeachment, Ondo Assembly direct Chief Justice to constitute 7-man panel on the Deputy Governor. And we have 5.5 billion naira invested in production of BB Niger All-Star. You can find more on page 6. The last story, reps probe 15 trillion naira pension fund asset. You can find detail of that on page 27, and that's all on Daily Sun newspaper.
On Sporting Sun newspaper, Juventus in court today over 19.9 million euros CR7 debt. That's Cristiano Ronaldo's debt. You can find more details at the back page. And on Champions League, Newcastle out 5 key players against PSG. We have still committed to Man United buyout. This is coming from Qatari Sheikh. You can find more details on page 2. Chilwell ruled out until December. Man United too big for Ten Hag. You can find more details on the back page. This is a statement coming from Ibrahimovic. And we have Super Falcons player Amaju Akinwumi heap praises on for Lado. You can find more details on page 6. And we have Chelsea leads race for Osimhen transfer. More details can be found on page 6. We have NPFL introduces random dope test for players. Chelsea PSG retain interest in Magnani. Inter Miami to grant Messi Barcelona farewell. The big story on the paper: Okocha Chukwueze will become successful in Milan. More details can be found on page 6. Another downside, we have Anthony Joshua net worth hits £100 million mark. More details at the back page. Real Madrid latest club monitoring Boniface. More details on page 6. And that's all the news on Sporting Sun newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at business, how it affects us all on Business Day newspaper, with a big story here that says Nigerians return to 2G devices as economy bites. That is to say, a lot of people are beginning to sell their expensive gadgets because they can no longer afford it. And this is actually what is actually going on presently with the hardship. People would rather have food on their tables than to have expensive gadget that they cannot actually, do anything. Well, you can read more detail of that on the front page and continue on page 2. Nigeria holds the FDI with Africa's highest work visa fee. You can find that inside the paper. Stocks rally ahead of the third quarter earnings season. More inside the paper as well. Tinubu submitted forged document to INEC. This is coming from Articles 8. You can find that back and forth on page 29. Nigeria's economic reform needs to regain momentum, coming from the FT. More of that story can be found on page 21 of the Business Day newspaper. And that is all on Business Day, and also how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you so much, Rachel, for always doing this with me.
You're welcome.
And also thank you to our viewers and supporters for keeping the day with us on this program. Until we come you again, do have a blessed day ahead.